I'm Emily Carter, 32. The daughter still treated like she belongs at the kids' table while my sister Olivia shines as the family's crown jewel. Every gathering is the same, her promotions toasted like scripture, my contributions dismissed as clerical errands. But last summer, something shifted, an announcement delivered under fairy lights that Olivia would inherit it, all the estate, the trust, the family name, while I sat invisible, clutching a paper plate. Ever been told you don't matter even in your own home? Hit like if you've ever been overlooked by the very people meant to lift you up, and comment if someone else always took the spotlight. For me, it started that night on the lawn, with laughter sharper than glass and a promise I silently made: they would never erase me again. Plastic dinosaurs and rockets from years of chipped paint stared back from the table's surface, relics of childhood that clung to me as tightly as my parents' perception of who I was. Around me, paper plates slid on thin tablecloths decorated with faded stars, and the laughter of aunts and uncles floated like smoke from the grill. It was the kind of laughter that sounded easy, but I could hear the strain underneath, an orchestra tuned to play for someone else. I carried the pasta salad I'd picked up at the supermarket, set it down between glossy bowls of ribs and vibrant summer slaws, and immediately wished it could vanish. The family swarmed toward anything that carried the sheen of effort: the smoked brisket Uncle Henry had tended all morning, the delicate strawberry shortcakes my mother arranged with the precision of a jeweler. My salad stood lonely, ignored, as though even mayonnaise knew its place in the hierarchy. From the corner of the lawn, my father presided over the grill, like a general on parade, spatula in hand, smoke framing his silhouette. "Keep an eye on the little ones," Emily, my mother, called, not looking at me, but through me, like traffic to be directed. Her voice carried that crisp tone she reserved for things she considered beneath her, like parking meters and weeds. I forced a smile and slid into the chair among cousins half my age, their sticky fingers clutching juice boxes. The heat of the July sun bore down on us, and the lawn hummed with mosquitoes and conversation. At the long picnic tables where the adults sat, wine glasses clinked and stories rose with practiced ease. Names of promotions and campaigns, always Olivia's, moved from mouth to mouth like a hymn. I speared a cherry tomato, its skin snapping in my mouth, acidic and sharp, while the words "Olivia just got promoted again" drifted across the yard like smoke. My father glanced at me as he flipped a burger. "Did you bring your office work?" The pause before office felt deliberate, as though the word were barely worth using. He didn't wait for my answer before adding, "Bet they keep you busy making copies." "They keep me busy," I said evenly, swallowing both tomato and retort. Nearby, my mother carried her phone like a holy relic. "Olivia just texted." She raised the screen high, a simple sparkle emoji displayed as if it were scripture. A ripple of admiration spread across the table. Aunts, cousins, even the dog seemed to lean toward her. I sat invisible, the kids beside me squabbling over ketchup, which somehow felt more dignified. "Don't slouch, Emily," my mother corrected, swooping past me with napkins in hand. "Posture communicates ambition." I straightened. Ambition apparently was spinal. Aunt Margaret dropped into the seat beside me, her bracelets clattering. "How's the clerical world?" she asked, her voice buttered with pity. "You always were so good with details." "I still know the alphabet," I said, smiling tightly. "It's been a big year for the letter M." "M. Meetings," I replied, and let the silence close in around us. At the main table, my father raised his voice, commanding attention. "We're proud of all our children, of course." He began, already slipping into the preamble that always preceded Olivia's coronation. "But tonight we'll have something very special to celebrate when she arrives." Glasses lifted, smiles widened, and a collective anticipation pressed down like humidity. Helen moved closer, eyes sharp as she studied me. "Olivia just got promoted. And you?" She let the pause cut deep. "Still copying papers." The words dropped with the weight of a gavel. My cheeks burned, but I forced my jaw to stay slack. My lips parted in the semblance of a smile. The children at my table giggled at something sticky on their fingers. Around us, lanterns swayed in the evening breeze, scattering coins of light over the lawn. Then from the curb, the sound of a car horn split the air. Heads turned. Phones lifted. My mother clasped her hands together like a prayer answered. The driveway filled with the purr of an engine too polished for this suburban street. I set down my plate, the grass warm beneath my sandals. Emily looks up as a luxury car pulls into the driveway, her smile unreadable. Every eye lit up when Olivia arrived, and I faded into the wallpaper. The air shifted the moment her heels clicked against the driveway, the scent of her perfume floating ahead like an announcement. Conversations that had meandered lazily just seconds before tightened with sudden excitement. Laughter sharpened, hands fluttered, bodies pivoted toward her like flowers to the sun. My parents stood first, clapping as though a headliner had finally taken the stage. Olivia emerged from her car draped in silk, the color of midnight sunglasses perched even as dusk settled. She carried glossy shopping bags, labels glinting like metals as if she'd returned from conquering Rome rather than from the city's luxury mall. An aunt actually gasped, and someone muttered, "Always so thoughtful." The irony pricked. I had brought food. She had brought wrapping paper. Guess which one the family remembered? My mother rushed forward, practically bowing. "Darling, you didn't have to." Her hands trembled as she grasped the bags. My father beamed, clapping Olivia's shoulder. "That's my girl," he said, his voice filling the yard with approval. He had never said it to me, not once, in 32 years. I watched the crowd swell around her, my cousin snapping photos as if proximity to her glow might elevate them. Olivia smiled with studied grace, tilting her head, so the golden light caught her hair just right. It was nothing she said, drawing out the syllables, and yet everything about her tone declared, it was everything. I stayed at the kids' table, plastic cup in hand, silent witness to the coronation. My heart thrummed against the cheap folding chair, each beat chanting a single word forgotten. Did everyone hear Uncle Henry's voice cut through? "She's just been promoted campaign director now." Applause erupted. Aunts leaned in, eager to sip the story like champagne. My parents glowed, basking in her assent as if her promotion had been theirs. No one mentioned how promotions in politics are greased by favors, whispers, and a talent for smiling through lies. I knew. I'd seen enough headlines buried beneath the fold. But here in our backyard, truth was as unwanted as my pasta salad. Olivia's eyes found me at last, her smile curving sharper than the knife glinting by the brisket tray. She strutted over, hips slicing the space, the crowd following behind her like an obedient tide. She bent at my side, lowering her voice just enough for the others to lean closer. "Maybe you should stick to photocopying, sis." The sentence cut deeper than she could know because she knew exactly how deep it would cut. Silence followed like an exhale sucked from the yard. Then laughter, brittle and forced, crashing down like shards of glass. My father chuckled too loudly, my mother swatted Olivia's arm in mock admonishment, and even the dog barked as though in on the joke. I sat rigid, fingers digging crescent moons into the paper plate on my lap. The children beside me whispered, "She's so cool," and I wanted to scream. Cool was easy when the world painted you in gold and handed you the brush. The night folded over itself after that, conversations resuming with artificial brightness. I drifted to the edge of the yard, my shadow stretching long against the fence. My phone buzzed, a faint vibration that felt like a lifeline. I glanced down, expecting some spam reminder about overdue bills. Instead, the screen glowed with a name I hadn't seen in months. Daniel Brooks. His message was short, precise, urgent. "We need to talk about Olivia's campaign." Emily's phone buzzes, a message from Daniel Brooks. "We need to talk about Olivia's campaign." They saw a secretary. I signed their promotions. That single thought pulsed through me as I lingered in the glass-walled office high above Manhattan, the hum of Thomson Media's headquarters still vibrating in the bones of the building. At street level, the city was a river of neon and horns, but here 26 stories up silence reigned, broken only by the faint scratching of my pen across the final approval forms. Stacks of proposals, budget drafts, contracts requiring my signature. They all waited in neat rows on my mahogany desk. No one downstairs would imagine the assistant they dismissed at family gatherings was the one authorizing million-dollar campaigns. Daniel's text still glowed in my mind, his words laced with urgency. Olivia. Campaign. Corruption. My sister's name threaded into my professional world like a crack creeping through glass. I removed my glasses, rubbed the bridge of my nose, then powered up the secure laptop. Thomson Media's interface blinked to life, each login step reminding me of the firewall I had built around my anonymity. Publicly, the CEO was anonymous, an intentional veil. Internally, only a handful of people knew my identity. It had been the only way to operate without my family's meddling or society's scrutiny. The screen chimed. Daniel Brooks appeared, his face lined by fatigue and framed by the sterile light of his home office. He had been my ally for years, the only executive privy to my truth, the only one I trusted to speak freely. "You look exhausted," I said, forcing levity into my voice. He didn't smile. "Emily, it's about Olivia. I need you to hear me out before you roll your eyes." I gestured for him to continue, though, dread coiled tight in my chest. "She's been taking credit for Sophia Lee's research," he said. His words fell like stones. Sophia compiled months of data strategy documents, original angles for the Brooks campaign. Olivia swooped in repackaged. It slapped her name on it and presented it as if it were hers. She's parading it around town as the reason for her promotion. I leaned back in the leather chair, staring at the ceiling. Of course. Olivia never did the dirty work. She polished outcomes, claimed victories, and left others bruised in her wake. Yet this revelation stung more than her jabs at the BBQ. This wasn't just family cruelty. This was professional theft, a rot seeping into the structures I spent years building. "Daniel," I said carefully, "are you sure?" He lifted a folder to the camera pages marked with Sophia's handwriting. "I have proof, drafts, timestamps, email trails. It's undeniable." The weight of his words pressed against me. Sophia was bright, loyal, and hard-working. To see her talent gutted for Olivia's vanity cut deeper than the insult about photocopying. This wasn't just my battle anymore. My reflection in the glass wall stared back, the city's shimmer haloing my outline. I looked like a stranger, polished, poised, untouchable. Yet inside, I was still the woman seated at the kids' table, dismissed, diminished. The contradiction clawed at me. "I can bury her with this," Daniel said, his tone steady but urgent. "But Emily, it might expose you too. If you're dragged into this, your anonymity ends. And once that mask drops, there's no putting it back." Silence thickened, punctuated only by the muffled wail of a siren far below. I thought of my parents drunk on Olivia's glow, blind to my existence. I thought of the laughter that night, the sting of humiliation tightening around my ribs. I thought of Sophia sitting somewhere with her hard work stolen, silenced, because she lacked the Carter name. Daniel's voice softened, cutting through my spiraling thoughts. "It may be time you stop hiding." The sentence cracked open a door I had long bolted shut. My pulse quickened, a mixture of terror and exhilaration. I rose and stepped toward the tall mirror near the bookshelf, the one I avoided when my disguise felt heavy. I stared into my own eyes, searching for the answer, for the courage I wasn't sure I had. Not yet, but soon. Her face was on the company bulletin. The work wasn't hers. The September air inside Thomson Media's downtown atrium felt falsely celebratory, polished with glossy banners and filled with the scent of catered hors d'oeuvres. Employees gathered in clusters, wine glasses, and hand laughter bouncing off the marble floor. At the center of it all stood Olivia, radiant under the spotlight of the company newsletter launch event. The bulletin boards had been updated that morning, her portrait framed in bold typeface campaign of the quarter, Olivia Carter. A dozen congratulatory emails had already been sent company-wide praising her for innovative strategy, groundbreaking data application, and flawless execution. None of it belonged to her. I stood by the periphery near the tall window's champagne glass untouched. My chest burned as I watched my sister bask in admiration. Cameras flashed, executives clapped her on the back as though she'd rewritten the language of marketing itself. In reality, the drafts, the figures, the layered analysis they all had. Sophia Lee's fingerprints. Sophia stood a few feet away, smaller than usual, her shoulders folding inward, as if she could disappear into the crowd. She clutched her tablet like a shield, eyes glued to the ground. The sight of her shook me harder than Olivia's smug smile ever could. I slipped through the crowd and touched her arm lightly. "You okay?" I asked softly, though I knew the answer. Her lips trembled before she forced a brittle smile. "Congratulations to Olivia Wright. She deserves it." The words landed heavy, false, a script she'd rehearsed to survive. "No," I whispered firmly. "She doesn't." Sophia's eyes flicked up glassy with unshed tears. For a moment she looked ready to collapse, but she pulled in a shaky breath and steadied herself. I recognized the mix of rage and helplessness all too well. Daniel appeared from behind, moving with deliberate calm, his phone in hand. He tilted it slightly toward me, and on the screen glowed metadata timestamps, draft comparisons, version histories. Lines of Sophia's work carried Olivia's name in the final file. "See this?" Daniel muttered under his breath. "She didn't even bother cleaning up properly. The version history shows her copying directly from Sophia's draft." "Sloppy." Sophia's head snapped up at his words. "You found that?" Daniel nodded. "Clear as day. If the board sees it, she won't just lose her promotion. She'll lose everything." Sophia's fingers tightened around her tablet, knuckles whitening. For a second, I thought fire might finally spark in her. But her voice broke when she leaned closer to me and whispered, "If I speak, I'll be destroyed." The sentence was barely audible, but it hit me like a thunderclap. I knew she wasn't exaggerating. Olivia played dirty. She had allies in the upper ranks, a polished reputation, and a family name she could wave like a shield. Sophia had none of that. The system would chew her up, dismiss her as a bitter subordinate, and move on. I glanced back at the stage where Olivia was shaking hands with the COO, her grin wide enough to split her face. She looked untouchable. But that bulletin, that spotlight, it was also a noose. She didn't see tightening. I slipped my phone from my blazer pocket, thumb steady despite the storm raging inside me. Opening my private email, I typed a new message and left the subject line stark and simple for the board. My finger hovered over Save Draft, the cursor blinking each pulse, a reminder that this was only the beginning. Before dessert, my father declared his legacy: Olivia will inherit it all. The words dropped into the warm summer air like shards of glass, silencing the clink of forks and chatter at the long picnic tables stretched across the backyard. Twilight had painted the Carter home in golden shadows, fairy lights flickering against the darkening sky, and yet the only illumination that mattered was the smug glow on my sister's face. Richard Carter stood at the head of the table, one hand raised as if he were presiding over a courtroom. His voice carried easily deep and theatrical, even though everyone had already gone quiet the moment he stood. "I thought it was time," he said, swirling his glass of red wine, "to speak about the future of our family, about my legacy." His eyes swept the table but lingered only briefly on me before anchoring on Olivia. "Helen and I have finalized the draft of our will. Olivia will inherit the estate, the investments, and the controlling interest in the family trust. Gasps rose from some cousins, though quickly muffled into polite nods. Helen clasped her hands together, her smile glowing with the fervor of a mother basking in her favorite child's light. "She's worked so hard," Helen cooed, voice trembling with emotion. "She's proven herself worthy in every way. Richard and I couldn't be prouder. It's only right that she carries on the Carter name and all we've built." I sat perfectly still, fork poised over my plate as if frozen mid-bite. The conversation blurred at the edges, my father's words echoing louder than the cicadas that had begun their evening song. My chest tightened, not from surprise, but from the confirmation of what I'd always known: their vision of family had never included me. Olivia, glowing beneath the string lights, leaned back in her chair with the easy posture of a queen receiving tribute. She adjusted the diamond bracelet on her wrist, letting it catch the lantern glow. "Well," she said, her voice cutting like sugar-coated glass, "I suppose this makes things official." "Thank you, Dad." "Thank you, Mom." Relatives began clapping, some sincerely, some awkwardly. I noticed one aunt exchange a glance with another, an uncomfortable shuffle that revealed more honesty than any words. Still, no one opposed the announcement. No one defended me. Olivia turned her head deliberately in my direction, her smirk blooming wider as the applause died down. She raised her glass. "See, even Dad thinks you're not worthy." The jab sliced clean as intended, and for a moment every gaze swung to me, waiting, measuring, some perhaps pitying. I let the pause stretch, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a flinch. My pulse slowed, deliberate, each heartbeat grounding me deeper into my chair. Then I set down my fork with quiet precision and lifted my eyes, meeting Olivia's with a calm that made her smirk falter just a fraction. My lips curved into a cool smile, steady and controlled. "You'll soon learn what worthy means." The sentence lingered in the hushed twilight, sharper than any knife on the table. A ripple of unease passed through the guests, though Olivia laughed too quickly, trying to disguise the flicker of doubt in her eyes. She didn't realize the foundation beneath her throne was already beginning to crack. In this company, power doesn't lie in titles, it hides in the digital footprints no one notices. After hours, the lobby is a glass aquarium city, lights drifting like slow fish beyond the revolving doors, our reflections moving through marble and shadow. Daniel meets me at security with a nod that says we speak in whispers tonight. He signs us in with his executive badge, then escorts me to the service elevator, the one that requires a key turned and held while the doors slide shut with submarine finality. We drop to the sub-basement, to a corridor that smells faintly of ozone and something colder than air. The IT security room is a clean hum of fans and blinking diagnostics, rows of racks behind tempered glass, a command island of monitors up front. Raj Patel looks up from his station, eyes rimmed in the red of too much blue light and not enough sleep. He straightens when he recognizes Daniel, then glances at me, the neutral appraisal of a man trained to log facts before feelings. "Thanks for coming in late," Daniel says. "We need a system-level audit on campaign assets tied to Carter marketing last 60 days, full version history cross-reference with external breach intel." Raj's eyebrows lift a millimeter. "Big ask." He hesitates then. To me, "You're authorized." Daniel answers for me, crisp, "She is." A beat. Then Raj rolls his chair into the glow, hands flying across the keyboard. The main screen fractures into panes, repository histories, access logs, email, metadata, threads, like skeletal trees, a forensic timeline building itself from 1,000 unremarked footprints. He pulls a diff view and color bleeds into the code, greens and reds, insertions and deletions, time-stamped like notches on a doorframe. "Start with the flagship campaign," Daniel says, naming the internal code name. Raj pivots. A list of files waterfalls down the screen. He clicks a creative brief, then an analytics model, then the final deck, the one plastered across the newsletter upstairs. The sidebar shows owners, editors, timestamps, autosave intervals. Olivia's name sits on the top layer like a signature. Raj opens a second panel competitor leak industry intel flagged a few weeks back. It isn't the stolen content itself. It's the derivative diagnostic our threat team compiled, hashes, structural fingerprints, a map of their deck's outline like a skeleton. He overlays the two. My breath stalls. The shapes snap into alignment sections, slide counts, even the order of exhibits. Not identical, but similar with intent. There, Raj says, zooming. Note the first appearance of that distinctive chart layout. He circles a timestamp with his cursor. External leak indexed at 02:14. Now watch. He scrubs our version history. Olivia's edit session opens at 02:17, adds the same layout at 02:19. That's tight. How tight, I ask. 3 minutes after the leak was crawled by our monitor bot, he opens the raw access log rows of time user IP action. And this IP, he taps the screen, isn't a corporate range. It's a residential block that's shown up before in late-night sessions associated with her account. Daniel exhales through his nose, not quite a laugh. She didn't even bother with a clean machine. I study the timeline the way a surgeon reads a scan. Olivia's name appears, disappears, reappears as if she's caught in a strobe of her own making. Raj pivots to emails. Metadata blooms sender recipient subject attachment hashes no content, just the scaffolding of conversations. He threads a sequence Sophia's internal memo with preliminary insights sent to the marketing team at 18:03. Olivia downloads attachments at 18:07, opens them at 18:08 forwards. An altered copy to herself at 18:29. Another diff. Another overlay. The pattern is a rhythm you can clap to once you hear it take polish present. Chain of custody matters, I say. If this goes upstairs, we need a sealed packet immutable. Export raw logs, version trees, overlays, generate SHA-256 for each notarize with our compliance tool. Raj is already clicking. On it. I'll include system time proofs and the audit trail of this pull, so it's repeatable in a review. He lifts a shoulder. Assuming there will be a review. There will, I say. The words settle into me like steel. We work in a triangle of quiet. Raj builds a forensic bundle, Daniel cross-checks the sequences, and I assemble the architecture in my head, what the board will need to see, what HR must trigger first, where the clean line runs between evidence and accusation. My hands are steady, though a pulse drums at my throat. Upstairs, they put faces on bulletins. Down here, we write history in hashes. Raj opens an encrypted workspace on the air-gapped unit. Where do you want the packet staged, private enclave, I say. Label it exactly as this for board. I dictate the access list by employee ID, a club with fewer members than a lunar expedition. Raj drags the sealed file into the directory. The progress bar scrolls a narrow river of blue marching to the far bank. He leans back, then swivels toward us. His expression flickers between professional and human. Look, he says, voice lower. I keep my head down. I protect the system. But what I'm seeing isn't accidental reuse or sloppy versioning. It's intent. If she realizes you're tracking this, she'll go nuclear. Sometimes a storm is necessary. The words leave me before I've decided to speak them, and they steady everyone for a breath. Daniel nods once, an unspoken pact. Raj returns to his console, initiating a background snapshot of the repository, a belt and suspenders copy that will survive even a fire drill. The room dims for a fraction of a second as the UPS tests. The monitors blink and then return their constellations of charts and logs, realigning. On the far right panel, a dashboard I haven't noticed shifts from the calm green of routine to something angrier. A banner unrolls across the top, red, insistent pulsing. Raj's chair stops spinning. That wasn't me. The banner stutters again, then locks into place. An icon begins to count actions in real time, each line etching itself into the log like a heartbeat gone wild. A session token we all recognize pings the system, and a folder path I know too well opens like a throat. Red alert flashes. Olivia is logged in, remotely deleting files in real time. The smallest voices can top giants if they don't break before speaking. The blinds in the HR conference room slice the afternoon sun into pale bars, casting zebra stripes across the long table. Dust floats in the light, drifting in the silence no one wants to break. Sophia sits at the far end, her shoulders pulled tight, the untouched glass of water sweating onto a coaster beside her. She doesn't look at me or Daniel or even at Maya Thompson from HR. She stares at the floor tiles as though one might open and swallow her whole. Daniel folds his hands on the table, leaning forward just enough to suggest quiet authority, but not pressure. "We're here to make sure this is safe," he says. His voice is even measured, like a hand extended across a gulf. "No retaliation, no exposure outside this room unless you choose." Sophia's fingers twist the edge of a tissue, pulling strands loose until it unravels in her lap. Her voice is little more than a rasp. "You don't understand. Olivia, she doesn't just steal ideas, she destroys people who get in her way. Ask anyone who tried before. They're gone." Maya clears her throat softly, her tone clipped but professional. "HR policy ensures that if you make a formal report, it is confidential. There are protections in place." Sophia laughs once, bitter and short. "Policies don't stop careers from ending." I lean forward, then choosing my words carefully. "Sophia, I know what it feels like to be invisible, to do the work and watch someone else bask in the credit, to hear whispers about how you'll never measure up." I glance at Daniel, then back to her. For years, that's all I heard. But letting it stand didn't protect me. It just taught them they could keep doing it. Sophia finally looks up, her eyes rimmed red, dark crescents beneath them from sleepless nights. There's a question there, raw and desperate. "And what happened to you?" I don't answer directly. Instead, I let silence fill the room just long enough that the weight of it presses my point. I want her to feel the truth, without me spelling it out, that surviving is possible, but only if you choose not to stay silent. Daniel opens a secure laptop, tilts the screen toward her. "There's a reporting portal, encrypted. Your intake form goes to a compliance server that even Olivia can't touch. Maya will be your liaison, everything filters through her. If this escalates, you'll have a shield. But we can't start without your statement." Sophia's hand hovers near the keyboard, trembling. "And when she finds out, she will," I admit. "Eventually. But think about this, every time she steals and gets away with it, she grows stronger. If you stay silent, she wins twice, once by stealing, once by silencing you." The words hang there, sharper than I expected, slicing through the air like glass breaking. Sophia's face crumples. She presses her palms against her eyes for a moment, shoulders shaking once, as if the fight inside her is tearing something loose. When she lowers her hands, she looks younger, but also older, like someone who has carried too much for too long. Maya slides the intake form across the table, her pen clipped neatly to the top. "You don't have to write a novel. Just what you saw, what you know. The rest can follow." Sophia takes the pen. It hovers above the line as though it weighs more than her entire arm. I catch the small tremor in her wrist. The room holds its breath with her. For a heartbeat, I fear she'll push it back, run for the door, let the silence swallow her again. But then slowly the pen lowers. Ink touches paper. The first letter scratches into existence, uneven, hesitant, but real. Her hand trembles as she signs the HR intake form. Olivia knew how to smile for cameras, but cameras also knew how to catch lies. The press lounge at Thompson Media had been converted into a stage-white backdrop stamped with the company logo, a gleaming podium, rows of chairs packed with journalists who smelled blood in the water. Olivia swept in as though it were her coronation, her silk suit tailored to the last inch, diamond studs catching the light. The room tilted toward her, Cameras clicked like a swarm of insects hungry for her smile. She gave them exactly what they came for, head tilted just so teeth flashing a queen greeting her subjects. Daniel stood at the back near the AV booth, arms folded scanning every detail. Beside him, Caroline Wu, the PR lead, smoothed her blazer nervously. I remained closer to the exit where shadows allowed me to watch without being in the frame. I had sent the anonymous fact sheets the night before, knowing exactly which questions would follow. All Olivia had to do was open her mouth. She did, and it was a performance polished from years of practice. At Thomson Media, innovation isn't just a word, it's our heartbeat, she said, her voice warm with conviction. When I designed the Refocus campaign, I knew it would be groundbreaking. The numbers, the reach, it's proof of leadership. She gestured with her manicured hands, every move, rehearsed every pause, calculated to radiate confidence. Relatives at the BBQ would have swooned just like these reporters were meant to. But the atmosphere began to shift. A journalist in the second row, glasses perched on his nose, raised his hand. Ms. Carter, can you elaborate on the sources of inspiration for Refocus? Some analysts suggest parallels with similar campaigns abroad. Olivia's smile didn't falter, but her eyes flickered. Innovation often means arriving at similar ideas. Competition drives the market, she said quickly. A deflection smooth but not seamless. Cameras caught the twitch of her jaw. Another reporter leaned forward, flipping through a stapled packet. My packet. In fact, she said, our review shows that 72% of the language in your proposal is identical to a draft submitted by East Point Advertising 6 months earlier. Care to comment? A murmur rippled across the room. Caroline's pen froze mid-note. Daniel's mouth tightened into a thin line. I felt the hum of victory in my chest, but kept my face unreadable. Olivia laughed, too high-pitched, too brittle. I find it amusing how much time people spend trying to discredit success. That's the problem with jealousy, it feeds rumors instead of results. Her hand gripped the podium edge. This company thrives because I lead fearlessly. The journalist didn't blink, but the timestamps from East Point's drafts are public record. Your proposal came after. Did you borrow directly? The question detonated like a grenade. Olivia's practiced poise shattered. She blinked, mouth parting, caught without a line to recite. A flicker of panic passed over her features before she masked it with anger. Jealous insiders, she snapped, her voice echoing harshly against the walls. Always trying to undermine me. Cameras caught the crack. Whispers spread like fire through the room. Caroline shifted in her seat, her knuckles whitening around her notepad. Daniel's eyes flicked to me, once steady like the nod of an ally confirming the trap had sprung. And then it happened. The fatal slip. A journalist raised his recorder closer. So you deny any overlap? You're saying this campaign is entirely your own work? Olivia's face flushed. Her chest rose and fell, fury overtaking calculation. Ask Emily. She's been obsessed with me for years. The words flew out, sharp, reckless, a dagger thrown in blind rage. The silence that followed was deafening. Cameras zoomed in on her, capturing the wild edge in her eyes, the sheen of sweat above her lip. Every flashbulb immortalized the fracture in her facade. For a heartbeat, she seemed to realize what she'd done, but it was already too late. The tape was rolling, and the world had just heard Olivia Carter expose her own obsession. Tradition repeats itself, but this time I wasn't walking in empty-handed. The backyard smelled the same as it had in July, charcoal smoke, tangy barbecue sauce, the sweetness of corn roasting on the grill. Fairy lights once again draped from tree to tree, swaying gently in the October breeze. The same cousins clustered in the same chairs, the same laughter bubbled over paper plates, and the same Carter pride thickened the air like syrup. But the atmosphere, at least for me, was not the same. I had walked into this arena of humiliation before, head-bowed hands carrying nothing but a pasta salad they mocked. Tonight, I carried leverage. Invisible, quiet, but lethal. Richard raised his glass at the head of the table, his booming voice commanding attention the way it always had. Family, thank you for gathering again. It's tradition, and traditions bind us. He puffed his chest, pride swelling in his words. And as I said before, our estate, our family legacy remains in good hands. Olivia's hands. His gaze swept over the crowd, then landed squarely on her, beaming as if she were the living embodiment of Carter's success. Helen clapped first, loud and adoring, her eyes wet with admiration for her favorite child. The relatives followed, applause peppered with approving nods. Olivia, resplendent in a tailored cream dress, let the praise wash over her, her smile wide and sharp as a blade. "Thank you, Daddy," she said sweetly, then turned her gaze to me. "Some of us are born to carry the torch. Others, not so much." Laughter rippled around the table, tentative, polite, unwilling to resist the current. I didn't flinch. I let her have her moment, let them all laugh, because I knew what was coming. The air itself felt charged, heavy with the weight of a secret about to surface. Olivia launched into her next performance, a monologue of self-celebration. "Running Thompson Media has been a privilege," she declared. "Every campaign we've spearheaded proves what leadership looks like. But of course," she gestured lazily toward me, "some people prefer to sit in the shadows, criticizing instead of contributing." I caught Daniel's eye across the patio. He stood near the speaker's, phone in hand, expression unreadable. At my smallest nod, he tapped the screen. The speakers crackled to life. The room of laughter turned silent as the first words of Olivia's press conference echoed through the backyard. Her voice, amplified, filled the air. "At Thompson Media, innovation isn't just a word, it's our heartbeat." She sounded polished at first, the version of Olivia they all knew. Then the shift came, the stumbling, the accusations, the fury. "Ask Emily, she's been obsessed with me for years." The clip ended in a jagged silence. A stunned beat passed before whispers surged through the family like an electrical current. Heads turned, eyes darted from Olivia to the speakers to me, as though trying to piece together how their flawless daughter had cracked so openly on record. One cousin muttered, "That's not good," while another shielded her mouth behind her hand. Olivia's composure wavered. "That was taken out of context," she snapped, too loud, too desperate. Her voice quivered with a pitch none of them had heard from her before. This is manipulation. Jealous insiders, like I said." Her hands trembled as she gestured toward me, her eyes wild, searching for a defense that didn't exist. Richard's brow furrowed for the first time, confusion clouding his practiced pride. Helen shifted in her chair, glancing nervously at the relatives who were no longer clapping but murmuring, questioning. The golden aura surrounding Olivia, polished for years, began to fracture before them. Every flash of doubt in their eyes cut deeper than anything I could have said aloud. And then, as the murmurs grew, the sound of the iron gate creaking open sliced through the chatter. Every head turned. Eleanor Grant, chair of the Thompson Media Board, stepped into the backyard in her navy suit, posture as sharp as her reputation. The journalist trailing behind her clicked a recorder on camera light, flashing red. Eleanor's voice carried across the yard, cold and resolute. "Tonight, we settle what's real. For years I played small. That night I stood at full height. October had cooled the backyard into a breath of smoke and dew. The fairy lights hung like a constellation pinned just above our heads, and beneath them my family shifted in their chairs, uncertain of which script to follow. The earlier laughter had curdled into a hush that tasted like metal. Eleanor Grant stood straight as a verdict near the patio, a leather folio tucked under her arm. Daniel hovered by the outdoor speaker's, eyes flicking between me and the assembled relatives, as if timing a cue. Olivia's smile was too bright a blade, polished to blindness. Richard's hand rested on the back of her chair, proprietary. Helen clutched a linen napkin as though it could keep the night from slipping. Eleanor didn't waste time. I'm here in my capacity as chair of the board, she said, her voice cool as the air. I've reviewed preliminary materials regarding allegations of intellectual property misappropriation and associated misconduct. HR has jurisdiction, and the case meets the threshold for a formal investigation. The word investigation landed hard. I watched it ripple through the backyard, a cousin straightening an aunt whispering the way people do in church when they pretend they aren't. Olivia laughed, sharp, synthetic. You can't be serious. This is a family barbecue. This, Eleanor replied, is a venue where claims were made publicly and reputations were staked. We'll restore the appropriate venue shortly. For now, clarity. She nodded once in my direction, an invitation widened into inevitability. I stepped forward, feeling the grass give slightly beneath my heels, feeling also that something far older and heavier was giving way inside me. I had practiced being small for so long my bones remembered the shape. I let them forget. I am Emily Carter, Chief Executive Officer. It was not a flourish. It was a key in the right lock. The sentence changed the map of the yard chairs, recentered gazes, rerouted alliances, rearranged with one breath. The surprise moved through faces like a slow light. Richard's mouth opened, then shut, his certainty scrambling for new footing. Helen swayed, caught herself on the table. Olivia blinked as if she'd been splashed mascara, rigid as armor. Daniel's thumb tapped his phone. The outdoor screen we'd used for July movie nights blinked on, projecting a clean audit trail against the side of the house where my worth had been measured in seating charts and size. Raj's version histories appeared, first color difference slides, the competitor's layout skeleton, timestamps locked to system time. A cursor circled the 3-minute gap between leak and original edit. The logs rolled impersonal as tied access copy rename. Then the emails, a lattice of metadata without content enough to sketch a theft in negative space. Finally, the HR intake confirmation with Maya's reference ID, followed by a recorded statement from Sophia, her voice steady but small, describing the morning she found her deck rebadged with my sister's initials. Eleanor narrated without adornment. These exhibits are presently in a sealed compliance vault. Each artifact is hashed and notarized. Chain of custody is intact. She looked to me. I nodded. Additional witness interviews are scheduled. For transparency, Ms. Lee's identity will be protected under policy until the formal conference. Aunt Margaret, who had once asked me if the alphabet ever got boring, raised a hand as if we were in a PTA meeting. But Olivia brings in business, she said weakly. Surely this is some misunderstanding. Misunderstandings don't line up to the minute, Daniel said, stepping into the light with a calm that told me he'd chosen his side long ago. His gaze touched mine for a beat and held. They also don't produce derivative structures that match external drafts at 72%. The screen froze on that number, big as weather. The backyard breathed out as one organism. Somewhere a fork tapped porcelain without rhythm. Olivia snapped. You stole everything from me. The accusation was so perfectly upside down I almost laughed. I didn't. I felt the old ache rise, the one formed by years of being told I was less and less until the sum approached zero. I let it pass through me like a wave that had finally run out of ocean. You can't lose what you never truly had. No one clapped. A good line isn't for applause. It's for quiet. The quiet arrived deep and clean. Richard looked at his hands as if they belonged to someone who had just dropped something valuable. Helen's eyes glistened with denial, curdling into doubt. A journalist near the gate invited yes. Necessary more so kept his recorder trained, red light, steady history taking notes. Eleanor closed her folio. We will proceed by the book. HR has already opened a case file. Ms. Carter, she said, turning to Olivia with the implacable kindness one reserves for storms. One refuses to name. You are entitled to representation and to respond to the evidence in the appropriate forum. Olivia's chin tilted. You think you can humiliate me like this? In front of everyone. I glanced around the yard, the hydrangeas, the plastic dinosaurs on the kids' table, the string lights that had watched me shrink and now watched me stand. No, I said softly. You did that yourself. For a beat, her breath stuttered. She turned desperate for a harbor that would not hold. Dad, she said, a child again, reaching for a hand that used to steady any wobble. Richard, sainted by his own mythology, found no scripture. We'll sort this, he murmured, but even he seemed unsure which daughter the promise was supposed to save. Caroline from PR slipped in through the gate late to the scene, early to the fallout. She caught my eye, read the room, and paled. She'd be busy tomorrow. We all would. Eleanor addressed Olivia one last time, voice, even the evening itself listening. Tomorrow morning, HR office. Or tonight, sign your suspension. Olivia storms off. Glass wasn't the only thing shattered that night. My family splintered too. The sound of Olivia's heels on the stone path lingered even after she was gone, each strike against the patio like a nail driven into the silence she left behind. A wine glass tipped in the confusion rolled off the buffet table and broke on the deck boards, its pieces catching the fairy lights like shards of frozen fire. Around me, relatives whispered in low, fractured tones. Some pretended to console Helen, others hovered near Richard, waiting for a cue, as if their loyalties had suddenly become negotiable. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Standing still among the wreckage of a party that had once been staged to elevate Olivia, I simply collected the moment, every darting glance, every whispered question, and let it burn itself into memory. Then, with Daniel at my side and Eleanor nodding once in affirmation, I walked out through the gate as though leaving a boardroom I had just adjourned. No grand farewell, no apology. Calm was my inheritance, and for the first time it felt like mine. That night I barely slept. The echoes of my family's unraveling replayed in my mind, but instead of torment, they hardened into resolve. By dawn I was already dressed for the office, a navy suit that belonged to the CEO I had kept hidden for too long. Daniel met me in the lobby carrying a folder stuffed with overnight email statements from Sophia Raj's finalized logs, Caroline Wu's damage control drafts. Thomson Media's HQ buzzed with the awareness that something monumental had shifted. By 9 o'clock, the HR team gathered in Conference B, the one with frosted glass that muted but couldn't conceal the presence of power inside. Eleanor presided, her expression implacable. Olivia sat across from her, flanked by a lawyer whose suit was sharper than his arguments. The suspension letter lay on the table, its weight heavier than the polished wood beneath it. Effective immediately, Eleanor declared, Olivia Carter is suspended pending full review. Access to systems and company resources is revoked. The lawyer muttered about due process, but Olivia's glare was louder. She didn't look at me directly yet. Her silence screamed accusation. I signed the final page as witnessed the pen steady in my hand. Olivia's hand, by contrast, trembled as she scrawled her refusal on the acknowledgement line, her defiance still masquerading as strength. She stood abruptly, chair scraping, and stalked out just as she had stormed from the backyard. Only this time it wasn't family she was leaving in tatters. It was her career. Later that afternoon, back in my office, the city skyline framed me like a reminder that power was both fragile and absolute. I barely had time to sip coffee before Helen walked in, unannounced. She looked smaller somehow, her hair disheveled, eyes red from crying. She closed the door softly, but her voice, when it came, was raw. Emily, please, she whispered, stepping closer, wringing her hands as though she could fold the past into something palatable. She's your sister. Don't destroy her. Whatever she's done, don't drag her through this. I rose slowly, letting the desk remain a silent witness between us. Mom, I said, and the word cut me in ways she couldn't hear. I don't destroy the truth. I reveal it. Her breath caught, shoulders collapsing as if the marrow had drained from her bones. She pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, eyes wide with something between horror and grief. Without another word, she turned, opened the door, and left. The echo of it closing was final, like glass breaking, but this time, no one would sweep it up. In HR, truth doesn't wear designer clothes, it wears transcripts and signatures. The words echoed in my head as I sat at the long oval table, the blinds drawn tight against the November daylight. The HR investigation room was a place stripped of glamour. No cameras, no curated audiences, no glossy smiles. Just a stack of documents, the faint hum of the recorder, and the knowledge that careers lived or died within these walls. Olivia sat across from me, her cream blazer immaculate, her hair styled to perfection, as though appearance alone could erase the rot of what she'd done. She leaned back in her chair, arms folded, the tilt of her chin screaming disdain. Beside her, her attorney flipped through a binder highlighting passages that could not disguise what lay beneath. To my right sat Daniel, calm as ever, and Raj Patel, his laptop glowing faint blue with the digital logs that were about to become Olivia's undoing. Maya Thompson from HR presided, pen poised the still center of the storm. "Let's begin," Maya said, her tone professional, but heavy. "This is a formal review hearing of allegations concerning Olivia Carter. Statements will be recorded." Almost immediately, Olivia struck. "This is absurd," she said, her voice sharp. "My sister has manipulated all of you. She's been jealous for years. You're feeding off her obsession." Her eyes burned into me, but I didn't flinch. I'd prepared too long for this moment to waste energy on her venom. Maya noted Olivia's words, the pen scratching like a gavel. "Accusations are noted. Evidence will be weighed." Sophia Lee sat at the end of the table, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened. She avoided Olivia's gaze, avoided mine too, as if the weight of both sisters pressed her into the chair. I could see the doubt forming in her shoulders, the way her breath caught each time Olivia sneered. When Maya asked Sophia to read her prepared statement, she hesitated. I don't know if I can," she whispered, voice breaking. Olivia's smirk widened. "See? Even she knows this is a witch hunt." I leaned forward, my voice low but steady. "Sophia, listen to me. If you stay silent, she wins twice, once by stealing from you, and once by silencing you. You deserve better than that." Her eyes flickered up, meeting mine for a fleeting second. Something shifted, fragile but fierce. She unfolded the paper and began to read. Her testimony painted the theft clearly, the late nights, the drafts she'd created, the eerie familiarity of Olivia's final submission. Her voice wavered but did not stop. By the time she finished, her hands still trembled, but her resolve had crystallized into something Olivia couldn't laugh away. Raj clicked a few keys and the logs appeared on the projection screen, timestamps, edit trails, IP addresses. Every technical mark was a dagger, each detail aligning Sophia's work with Olivia's theft. Olivia's lawyer objected, rattling off jargon about procedural integrity, but Raj cut through the noise with calm precision. "These logs are immutable. They can't be fabricated. What you're seeing is the system's raw record." The room grew tense, heavy with the collapse of Olivia's defense. She shifted in her chair for the first time, pulling her blazer tight as though it could shield her from truth itself. Finally, Maya set down her pen. "After reviewing witness testimony and corroborating digital evidence, HR recommends immediate termination of Olivia Carter, effective today." Her voice didn't waver even as the words detonated in the sterile air. Silence followed, the kind that carried more weight than shouting ever could. Olivia broke it with a laugh, bitter, jagged, cutting. She leaned forward, her eyes blazing into mine like shards of glass. "Fire me then. Parade me out if you want. But remember this: Dad will never forgive you." The words hung there, not a defense, but a threat. And though her position had crumbled, she still clung to the one weapon she thought could wound me. Some wars were fought in boardrooms, ours were fought over a mahogany table at home. Mid-November poured cold light through the front windows, bleaching the living room into a stage set for negotiation. The mahogany coffee table, Richard's pride, oiled and polished like a trophy, vanished beneath an archipelago of envelopes and blue-backed legal folders. Mr. Collins, our family lawyer, perched at the edge of the sofa with his pen aligned to the ruled margin, the posture of a man who mistrusts both chaos and emotion. Helen hovered behind Richard's chair, wringing a dish towel she'd forgotten to leave in the kitchen. Across from me, Olivia lounged with the careless arrogance of someone determined to pretend nothing had changed. Richard cleared his throat. The sound had weight. It had always been his way of calling a meeting to order without asking permission. "Let's be direct," he said, tapping a folder as if knocking on a door that was already open. "Your mother and I finalized the revisions. The Carter estate will go to Olivia, primary beneficiary on the house, the trust, the portfolio. We've had to make hard choices. You chose your path. We chose ours." Mr. Collins slid a copy toward me, the paper whispering against the wood. My name appeared only where it had to in the small print that records a person's existence without obligating anything to them. I read each clause slower than necessary, not because I doubted the content, but because ritual matters when something ends. Olivia's bracelet chimed against the arm of the chair as she recrossed her legs. "Don't look so grave," she said lightly. "It's exactly what everyone expected." She tilted her head, the picture of benevolent triumph. "You've made a decent run for yourself, Em. You'll be fine." Helen winced. "Olivia." "What?" Olivia's smile thinned but did not break. "We're just being honest. Emily doesn't need all this responsibility. The house, the funds they require. Stewardship." Richard seized the cue. "Precisely. Continuity matters. The estate has a public face. Olivia understands how to carry it." He leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "And there's a way through this unpleasantness at the office. We'll keep Olivia in the will, and you," his eyes landed on me with the certainty of a foregone conclusion, "you will tell your HR people to stand down. End the spectacle. Family first." Mr. Collins's pen did not move. He watched the air between us the way a referee studies the line of scrimmage. I set the documents down, aligning their corners with the table's edge. "You can't bargain with other people's careers," I said. "HR isn't theater, it's policy." Olivia laughed low and incredulous. "Policy? You staged a trial at a barbecue. Spare me the sermon?" "You staged the lies," I said, and let the quiet after hold her gaze until she blinked. Then I reached into my bag and placed a thin leather folio on the table, sliding it forward until the crest stamped on the cover caught the winter light. "You want to talk stewardship? Fine. Let's include math." Richard frowned, the expression he wore when a spreadsheet contradicted his instinct. I opened the folio. Inside, deeds and statements waited in tidy stacks, my apartment and the small building I'd bought quietly 2 years back. My restricted stock grants. The investment vehicles I'd built one careful layer at a time. The valuation summary for the stake that actually governed the company they loved to name drop without understanding. Columns of numbers ran down the pages like a river you could drink from or drown in, depending on whether you knew how to swim. Mr. Collins leaned in despite himself. His brows rose by degrees like a curtain being drawn. Helen's fingers stilled on the towel. Richard's jaw worked, the muscle jumping as he recalculated who exactly he was lecturing. "I don't need your estate to prove my worth." The sentence landed without heat, all the more final for its calm. I let it sit. Let the room rewrite itself around it. Through the window, a gust of wind lifted the brittle leaves from the oak and pressed them against the glass, a brittle applause for something no one here wished to celebrate. Olivia's mouth curled. "Buying your way out of shame is that it wave a balance sheet and pretend you're better than the family that made you. The family that made me," I said, "taught me the cost of being underestimated. I paid it. In full." Richard recovered first, reaching for dignity like a coat fallen to the floor. This isn't about numbers, he declared, which is what men say when the numbers fail them. It's about legacy. Name, house, tradition. It's about integrity, I answered. And what you're asking me to do is bury evidence to protect a tradition of looking the other way. That's not legacy. That's rot with a ribbon. Helen stepped forward, voice frayed. Emily, please. We can't, your sister, this will follow her forever. Then perhaps she should stop running ahead of it? I said more gently than I felt. Mr. Collins coughed into his fist, a formal sound. Mrs. Carter. Mr. Carter, if I may, any agreement predicated on interference with an HR proceeding would be problematic. He risked a glance at me. Respect or fear of liability, it didn't matter. The effect was the same. The floor tilted. Olivia sat up, composure splintering. You think this saves you? You parade your little fortune like a medal and expect us to bow. No, I said. I expect you to stop confusing applause with truth. For a moment, even the clock on the mantel seemed to hold its breath. Richard looked at the will as if it had betrayed him by staying exactly what he asked it to be. Helen's eyes glossed not with understanding, but with the grief of a woman watching the map she used to navigate her life dissolve in her hands. I gathered my folio, closed it with a flat click that sounded to me like a gavel. I'll have Maya send you a copy of the policy language, I said, standing. If you'd like a mediator for future conversations, we can arrange one. But this negotiation is over. I reached the doorway before Olivia's voice followed lower now, venom finding a narrow vein. You think you've won? The company will swallow you whole. Firing one liar was easy, restoring trust was the real battle. The words reverberated in my head as I walked the length of the executive hallway toward the auditorium, each step echoing like a gavel strike. Thomson Media had survived the scandal, but survival wasn't victory. I could feel the tension in the air, employees whispering, eyes darting, shoulders hunched as though waiting for the next betrayal. Removing Olivia was only the first incision. The infection had to be drawn out, the culture sutured back together with something stronger than silence. Daniel met me at the glass doors, his tie askew from weeks of late nights, his expression steady but guarded. They're nervous, he murmured, tilting his chin toward the auditorium, where murmurs swelled like a restless tide. Half expect you to announce more firings. Not firings, I said. Rebuilding. And for the first time, I believed the word. Inside the main hall pulsed with unease. Rows of employees filled the seats, designers, copywriters, analysts, editors. Some folded their arms tight against their ribs, others fiddled with pens or phones as though bracing for judgment. Olivia's shadow still lingered in the corners, whispered in the lines of gossip that had once crowned her untouchable. Now every face turned to me, waiting to see if her downfall had only been an exchange of tyrants. I stepped up to the podium. The microphone caught the shuffle of papers before I even spoke, magnifying the smallest tremor. I let the silence settle long enough for anticipation to stretch taut. We've been through fire, I began. And fires burn more than lies, they burn trust. I won't pretend the last months haven't shaken us. But we're not rebuilding what was. We're building something better. Eyes rose. Arms unfolded. I laid out the framework, a merit-based evaluation system stripped of favoritism, nepotism, and the invisible hierarchies that had let theft and arrogance masquerade as brilliance. Performance would be measured by verifiable outcomes, creativity, collaboration. No one's family name, no one's charm at cocktail hours would shield them. Behind me, a slide appeared, not of numbers or charts, but a single phrase in bold white text on black: fairness first. Gasps scattered through the room as though the word itself was radical. I continued. Those who've carried the weight without recognition, we see you. We will reward you. And those who feared speaking truth to power, we will protect you. We're drawing new lines today, and they are lines of integrity. A murmur rippled. Relief, disbelief. It didn't matter. Seeds planted would take their own time. I turned to Sophia, seated in the front row, shoulders curved as if she expected another blow. Sophia Lee. I said, my voice steady. Your ideas were stolen, your courage doubted. But you spoke when it mattered. And today, you are not a cautionary tale, you are an example. I beckoned her forward. Applause began hesitantly, then swelled as she stood and approached the stage. Tears glistened in her eyes, her hand covering her mouth, as though afraid to breathe it in. I handed her the promotion letter formalizing her new position as senior campaign manager. Her lips trembled. "Thank you," she whispered. But the microphone carried it, fragile and powerful all at once. The applause grew punctuated by a whistle from the back. Raj leaned against the wall, arms crossed, trying to hide the pride lighting his face. "And Raj Patel," I said, turning toward him, "your integrity under pressure saved this company from deeper rot. Forensic work is invisible until it isn't, but tonight it will not be invisible. Thank you." The staff rose to their feet, clapping louder now. Some clapped for Sophia, some for Raj, but in that rising sound was the pulse of something the company had almost forgotten belief. Daniel glanced at me, a smile tugging at the edge of his weariness. "You're turning the tide," he mouthed. I didn't answer. The moment wasn't about me. The climax arrived quietly without orchestration. A veteran copy editor, hair silver at the temple, stepped out from the rows. His hands shook as he gripped the microphone stand. For the first time, his voice cracked. "Fairness feels real here." The words broke something open. Applause thundered this time, uncoached, unhesitant. Sophia wiped her eyes openly. Raj ducked his head. Daniel exhaled like a man released from chains. I looked across the sea of faces and felt a current shift. Olivia's empire of fear had collapsed, but in its place something fragile and fierce was rising. Not worship, not silence, trust. The meeting adjourned, not with dismissal, but with conversation. Employees clustered in groups, voices buzzing with cautious excitement, as though they had been waiting years to speak freely. Back in my office night, pressing against the windows, the adrenaline faded into exhaustion. I sank into the chair, the sound of applause still vibrating in my chest. My inbox chimed. The subject line froze me. "Thanksgiving dinner." From Mom and Dad. My fingers hovered, reading and rereading the simple invitation. The cliffhanger hung in the glow of the screen, daring me to choose. This year, my seat wasn't at the kids' table, it was at the head. The words formed in my mind as I pulled out the carved oak chair at the end of the Carter dining table. The scent of roasted turkey, nutmeg, and garlic butter hung thick in the air, trying its best to disguise the quiet unease. For the first time in my memory, the head seat had been reserved for me, not for Richard, not for Helen, and certainly not for Olivia. Thanksgiving had always been an elaborate performance in our family crystal glasses, aligned like soldiers, fine china gleaming under the chandelier, a turkey so polished it seemed destined more for photographs than for eating. But this year the pageantry couldn't mask the hollow space that absence carved. Olivia's chair stood empty halfway down the table, and though no one dared say her name, every glance brushed against it like a bruise. The table filled with relatives trying to carry conversation, but their voices wavered between too loud and too cautious. My cousins spoke of promotions, new houses, children's milestones, but the air thickened each time their eyes flicked toward me. Once I'd been dismissed, ignored, made the family's background noise. Tonight my silence was weight enough to anchor the room. Richard cleared his throat. The patriarchal authority that once rumbled like thunder now sounded strangely brittle. He lifted his glass of amber whiskey, hand trembling just enough for me to notice. "To Emily," he said. "For her accomplishments, for her." leadership. The words snagged on his tongue dragged out like a confession rather than a toast. He swallowed his face, a map of pride and regret etched into reluctant lines. Glasses rose. Some clinked too eagerly, hoping the sound would drown the unease. Others barely touched rims, eyes darting toward me, toward Richard, toward Helen, unsure which loyalties still mattered. I raised my glass with a polite smile. Nothing more. The younger version of me would have basked in the recognition, starved for his approval. But tonight, his words no longer had the power to anoint or to wound. Helen's turn came without prompt. Her voice broke through the air like a fault line splitting. "I'm sorry." The words startled even her, trembling as if they'd waited decades to be born. She stared at the linen tablecloth, unable to meet my eyes. "I failed you, Emily. I let my love turn into comparison. I let Olivia's shine blind me, and I should have seen you, truly seen you, long before tonight." A hush fell. Forks lowered. Even Richard, stiff and unyielding, did not interrupt. I inhaled slowly. The room tilted with expectation, waiting for me to forgive, to comfort, to bind wounds that had never belonged to me. I met my mother's eyes at last, saw the rim of tears, the hollowed-out sorrow. I nodded, soft but firm. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "But I don't need apologies to move forward. What I needed was to live my truth. And I finally am." Her shoulders crumpled, relief and grief twisting together. She reached a hand across the table, stopping halfway, unsure. I let the space remain. Politeness was all I owed her tonight, no more. The meal stretched on, filled with half-hearted chatter, laughter that sounded forced, silverware scraping like tiny knives. Yet beneath it all, I felt a strange calm. The stage that had once humiliated me had become the stage for my quiet vindication. The child who had sat at the kids' table, overlooked and belittled, was gone. I glanced down the table, past the spread of casseroles and pies, past the faces of cousins and uncles and aunts. My eyes rested on the single untouched chair, its cushion smooth, its plate gleaming empty. Olivia's absence throbbed like a wound no one dared touch. Some absences never heal, and that's okay. The family table that once humiliated her became the stage of her quiet victory, a reminder that betrayal can wound, but not define. Justice came not through force, but through persistence, proof, and the courage to confront what others refused to see. When injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict can echo through a lifetime. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. If this story resonates with you, please like, share, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Type 1 if you feel the justice was satisfying, or 2 if you think the ending left more to be said.